Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in having the full in-person Plum seminar presented at your location, just go to my website, plumtheology.com, and I'd be happy to answer any of your emails, help set a date. The Plum seminar is ideal for parents who want to disciple their children, married couples, college students, and youth. And so if any of those fit your category, your church, or a Christian organization, please send me an email. I'll be happy to come out to you guys. All right, thanks a lot.
So the love in sex, the love purpose. This could be a very obvious one too, because we still call it making love, right? It's making love. Don't make love until you love someone, right? Whatever it might be, all kinds of sentences like that. But the love purpose in sex is supposed to reflect God's love. No surprise there, but yet we see it abused so many times anyways, even amongst Christians. We'll get into that in a minute, but see, we see so much in Scripture, what God's love is like, right? His love is sacrificial. It is committed. It is selfless. It is unconditional. It's all these wonderful, wonderful words, right? But then when people are dating and they think they're in love, they say, but I love him, or we love each other. Typically, they're not in that same place of love that's reflecting the love of God. Is it unconditional? Are they fully committed to one another yet? Are they willing to make all these other commitments to one another? And so they have their own distorted view of love, but it's not a love that's reflecting of God's love. And so like anything else in the Christian life, everything we do should be reflecting God's love. Obviously not just sex, but it's everything we do, and sex is no different. And so we see that Jesus summed up the commands, all of the law, in 2 commands, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So no surprise, the love purpose in sex should reflect the love that God has for his people. But there is still a lot of ways that we misuse this purpose. Because this is a parent seminar, I'll speak, just give an example from marriage. Many times in marriage, the sex life in a marriage could go something like this. Honey, if I do all the dishes and do all the housework and do all this stuff, do you promise we can have sex tonight, right? And typically it's coming from the husband, in most cases. Or, honey, if I put all the kids to bed, do all this stuff, can we have sex tonight, right? What? It's all good when it all works out that way, right? But how often does it work out exactly how we planned it out, right? If you start at the beginning of the day, how many things happen in your crazy household throughout that day where at the end of the night, who's tired, who has a headache, who's not in the mood, right? All these things could happen. And that's not reflecting the love of God. See, the danger in that is when people do that, they're setting a very dangerous precedent on their sex life. It is, if I do these, then you must give me this in return. And that's not reflecting the love of God. So even all sex in marriage is not glorifying to God. Just because 2 people are married, it doesn't mean every time they have sex, they're glorifying God. If their sex life is not reflecting the love of God, there's probably other more important issues that they need to resolve. I would say before the next time they have sex. If their sex is not reflecting the love of God, then they have issues to work out first. This is something that's very important. That's the love purpose in sex, is to reflect the love of God. Not by guilting our spouses into sex. It's not by manipulating them into sex. It's not by setting a quota for sex, right? This many times a week or this many times a month. Once again, it might seem all good when you're hitting all those quotas or hitting all those standards that you're setting for your marriage, but woe is the day when you don't hit those standards or you don't get that quota met. And you start resenting one another, or you start guilting one another, or saying you're not holding up your end of the deal, right? And so a lot of people think that these things work for their marriage. In their minds, it might be working for their marriage. But if you listen to a lot of marriage podcasts and Christian marriage podcasts, there are a lot of podcasts out there where women call in, mostly, once again, it's usually the wife, that will email or call into these podcast shows saying that they are often crying before they have sex with their husband. because the amount of pressure that they feel to fulfill this what they feel like is this unattainable standard that has been set for them in their sex life, in their marriage. And that doesn't reflect the love of God. And so the love of God needs to reflect the love, purpose, and sex needs to reflect God's love for his people. It is unconditional. It is selfless. It is fully committed. It is so many good things. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, right? We love that verse, even though it has nothing to do with marriage, but it has everything to do with how Christians should love. But for your teenagers, this is understanding the love, purpose of sex really comes into play when they start asking questions like, well, why can't we if we really love each other? And they start asking questions about premarital sex or I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong part of my notes here. It's funny because I give this talk so many times and I make little tweaks here. Anyways, for students, this comes into play for guilt sex as teenagers, right? If they start dating, and maybe you've heard this one, you remember this one when you were teenagers of, well, if you really loved me, then we would have sex by now. Or we would be doing this and this and this by now, right? And that is now the manipulating part coming in, involving the sex part of a relationship, and where it doesn't reflect the love of God, but in their minds, it's loving, but that's their own distorted view of love, but it's not reflecting the love of God. And so that's when we start seeing that come into play. Peer pressure sex, right? I need to have sex because everyone else is having sex. If I'm a virgin by the time I graduate high school, then I'm a loser, right? So there's that peer pressure factor as well that comes in play if people don't understand the love purpose of sex. Dating and dealing with temptation, right? If your kids are dating or think about dating or whatever it might be, or before dating, it's understanding that when we go down that road of sexual temptation, that if we fall into sexual sin, it's because oftentimes it's a misuse of the misrepresentation of the love of God. It's a distorted view of what love really is, and that's what usually causes a boyfriend or girlfriend to fall into sexual temptation, because they think that they're in love, but they're really just in their own definition of love. So that's the love purpose of sex. It needs to reflect God's love for his people and our love back for God.